what are you going to do when the going gets tough? And we always say we're not going to control things that we can't control. So those two things that I've said a million times, it gets to the point where you say it enough and it doesn't really mean anything. Controlling things that you can control and making the most out of the situation. I've heard that 1,000 times. And yet, in the first couple of days of these news, I found myself dwelling and not really being the person that I always said for others to be.
Welcome to the VMI Center for Leadership and Ethics Leadership Journey podcast.
This podcast aims to share leadership stories from our VMI Corps of Cadets and high-profile leaders who visit the Center for Leadership and Ethics and VMI Post. We're on this journey with you. Hey, I'm Emily Coleman.
And I am Derek Pinkham. We're your hosts of the podcast.
Sam Trepp is currently the first class president studying international studies in Arabic. He is sheltering in place at his home in Richmond, Virginia.
He plans to teach English to underserved populations upon graduation. In the podcast, we discussed his journey to VMI through transferring from the University of Richmond, how he performs his duties as president of the outgoing class of 2020, and how the transition to distance learning has affected it.
We discussed his experience at VMI and how that has shaped his views on leadership. We spoke to Sam remotely from his home. And without further delay, we give you First Class President Sam Trepp. Okay, we're here with Sam Trepp. Sam, thank you so much for being with us virtually.
Of course, thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, this is a little bit different. So we're going to start off by having you tell us your origin story. Tell us where you're from and what led you to VMI.
Great. So my name is Sam Trepp. I'm a current first classman at VMI. I've heard about the school for quite a while from my upbringing. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so a lot of my favorite teachers in middle school and high school were VMI grads, and it's a very prevalent influence here in Richmond. And so out of high school, I actually was not considering VMI. I thought about it earlier on, and I was like, I'm not crazy enough to do that. So I actually spent a year at the University of Richmond out of high school, and I had a really good buddy of mine who had graduated straight from my high school, was doing first year at VMI, going through the ratline, and I stayed in close contact with him. And after being, I guess, dissatisfied and not really feeling quite at home at U of R, I definitely knew that VMI would be the right switch to make. And so I signed the papers without even going to post. And my buddy John was like, that's the best decision you ever made. And sure enough, it was. So I'm very, very glad I made it.
That seems to be a running theme with us. We've had a lot of people say that they signed the papers or committed or whatever before they've even seen campus.
Even made it, yeah.
Really?
That's an interesting phenomenon. And it's funny that those folks perhaps are some prominent folks that make it to us. I'm not sure how that works, what that filter is, but maybe we'll figure that out.
Right. I'm not sure that. My friend John Keefe, he was the Honor Corps president last year, and so he obviously grew up in the system and really flourished, and he had nothing but good things to say about it after his first year.
Right.
What have you gotten involved with at VMI since coming here? Are you in any leadership positions right now, or have you been?
My main position is I'm the class president for class of 2020. This is my about third and a half year going on the position. We're elected at the end of our fourth class year. And so that has been just an amazing blessing in my time at VMI. I've really enjoyed the opportunity there to work with and serve my BRs in my class. So it's been pretty awesome. From the get-go, you are the initial representative of your class to all entities within barracks and outside regarding to VMI. The responsibilities start off manageable and easier as you begin as a third classman. You're essentially just in charge of controlling your stoop and being that liaison to your BRs, to commandant staff for the first and second, third classes. And then as you move up in the class system, more responsibilities pile on. Second class year, tackle ring figure with your vice president historian, and then you get introduced to the board of visitors, the alumni agencies, all these sorts of entities. And then first class year rolls around, and that's really the test. And that's when
can I just stop you for a second? Can you for the uninitiated tell us what stoop means?
Of course. So in barracks, our living situation is comprised of 4 stoops in ascending order from highest to lowest class. So firstclassmen who are the seniors. They are living on first stoop, which is the lowest, and then you go up higher and higher until you reach fourth and fifth stoop, and that is where the rats and then thereafter fourths live and reside. So
Right.
Barracks is a very special place to us members of the class system. We love it. It's where we do all of our work, and so it's been a cool journey down the stoops there.
Tell us about moving through the rat line and becoming a cadet and how that affected you or what it's taught you.
I think the rat line does a great job in really, first of all, testing whether or not you chose VMI for the right reasons. It'll definitely expose you from the get-go, regardless of the type of mental or physical preparation you did for it. And kind of after 3 years now of introspection and looking back on my time, I think that VMI, in the rat line specifically, does the very best job of stripping away those layers that all of us came into VMI with, whether it's a little bit of ego with what you think you're capable of physically, any sort of insecurities or things you're unsure about yourself. It really strips all those away and allows for you to, rather than look inward only to yourself and rely on yourself, to rely on others. And with that being said, allow you to show what you can offer to others as well, and reveal to yourself who you truly are and what you're capable of.
Right, so it kind of puts you all on the same level.
Yes, that is done through physical means, and you are able to see what you're able to do on a physical level, but I think it is deeper than that. I think it's about the emotional and moral intelligence that lies within you to connect with all these people around you. And that's, I think, the special thing.
So with your peers and dealing with your peers, how does that work? So your BRs, you're in a position of leadership. How does that change how you interact with them?
It makes you definitely cognizant of the actions you're taking, and being thrust into this position without really much experience to prepare you for it was a lot. But the only thing that you can really do is continue the genuine nature that, I guess, led me to VMI and through the rat line. And for sure, definitely experienced a lot of challenges and failures, but throughout the entire time, the level of care and love I have for my BRs as a whole and each of them individually is, I think, what makes any mistake reconcilable, and it's what drives all of us together. And it's an interesting spot to be in as a peer leader. It's very easy to be up in front of the rats, and they've got all eyes and ears on you. You definitely need to connect on a more real human level to your peers, because they're going to call you on your BS, and they should, and they do, and they keep it real, and that's why you got to keep it real all the time.
Right.
So it's been cool.
Wow, that's a great response. I love that.
Yeah, so you learn to appreciate what the rat line has taught you. Growing older and getting through the rat line, you learn to appreciate the things that you gain from being all put on the same level.
Always. And I think that, some of my fondest times and memories at VMI were during the rat line. I think that's when it's the most pure and raw experience you have there, because you are in the middle of that stripping of the ego and stripping of your layers and whatever conceptions you have about yourself are. And so, unfortunately, with everything else, as you grow further from that, you are susceptible to gaining some of that stuff back on, whether it be through a title, through rank, through just distance from others. VMI always finds a way to bring it back to that same baseline. And that's what I think is so special about classes in general, but I feel like our class has maintained specifically such a tight-knit sense of togetherness here throughout all 4 years.
Do you feel like you might have had an advantage having an extra year out of high school?
I think that any bit of time will allow for some maturation. I got to experience what some may call the ordinary college experience. And that only grounded in me more so the fact that VMI was the right place for me. Yeah, any level of additional experience you may have, some of our BRs enlisted in the military for a while, some also were transfer students, some take gap years, doing mission trips and things like that. And I think any bit of life experience you can have is beneficial. And it just speaks to that togetherness that VMI has with all these different bits and pieces coming in and coming into one.
Neat.
That's really cool that you get to see the difference between a first year at an ordinary college, like you said, and then a first year at a military school.
Definitely.
That must have been like a world's of difference.
It was, and I don't miss it for a second. I wouldn't. I would pick that switch I made a million times over. And I think we get caught up in the slogan sometimes of no ordinary college, and we kind of extrapolate from that maybe these additional meanings that we need to be careful about, because when I was at Richmond, there's amazing, incredible people there doing amazing things, just like there are at VMI.
Right.
And something I told the rats earlier this year was, yeah, you're not ordinary, but that doesn't like make you or us any more special than anyone else. It's a different path. It's very raw. It's very unique. But I think not putting ourselves up on any sort of pedestal is important to the fabric of what VMI is and what makes us special. Because if we talk about it, then if we talk about the cool stuff that we do or what we're, the things we go through, then why are we different than anyone else? So I think it's important to remember that you can reach these goals of togetherness and leadership through other venues, but VMI just does it in its own unique and effective way.
That's a really awesome sense of humility that you can gain from VMI, I guess.
Definitely. And it's something that you really remember when you're at, and it's because you're told all the time. But it's a good you get a daily dose of humble pie at VMI, so it's definitely a good thing to remember.
Awesome. So back to you being president, how are you managing that virtually now that we're in the middle of a pandemic?
It's very weird and pretty unfortunate, just because I know that this was the time. I mean, right when you get turned over into your summer class dike, which is the summer uniform, everyone gets really excited to be out in the warm weather, hanging out with their rats once they've broken out, and enjoying those last few weeks of graduation parties and things like that. And that does hurt, and it did hurt really bad on the onset of that news. But we're doing things that are necessary to continue out the year. And I tried to frame this in a way to be an opportunity rather than a setback, because we talk the talk all the time about what are you going to do when the going gets tough. And we always say we're not going to control things that we can't control. So those two things that I've said a million times, it gets to the point where you say it enough and it doesn't really mean anything. Controlling things that you can control and making the most out of the situation. I've heard that 1,000 times. And yet the first couple of days of these news, I found myself dwelling and not really being the person that I always said for others to be, and the person that I thought I was. And so after a couple of days of that realization, had to kind of switch it up and say, let's take actions that we can. So the two things that I think are most important now are, for my BRs and myself, we got to enjoy these last couple months as a class together as best we can. And then we got to prep 2021 to take the reins along with the rest of the core. And so for the turnover preparation, we've been doing a solid job with 21's leadership. Dylan Stoltzfus, he's the second class president. He's been killing it on the receiving end of this training and advice. We've had a lot of Zoom sessions. We've had some evaluations passed back and forth. And then for our end, for 20's end, it's our only really responsibility as a whole was to enjoy this time together. Besides the additional votings for different valedictorian and awards and things like that. And so what we did was we've set up this weekly newsletter that we've sent out to try to supplement some of that fun barracks lifestyle and barracks humor. Called it the Quarantiner, because we're all stuck at home. And so it's been fun. And so we've got a little inbox set up, quarantiner@mail.com, and every week my BRs and I, we've been sending stuff in there. And whether it's like kind of a spoof satirical article about the quarantine, memes, memories, positive outlooks on the situation, we've had weekly things of those that I've been compiling and putting out there and sending out to the class. And so I'd be a liar if I said that makes up for this, but what else can you do? And it's been a relief in some of this chaos, and I think hopefully it's been making people feel a little bit more connected.
Okay.
So Sam, what are your plans after graduation? Are you going to be able to attend in December?
I will.
If there's
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank goodness. I'm I'm really excited for that. I'm also very thankful for VMI. This is something that nobody can control, and the appreciation and respect and support I've gotten from all levels, superintendent down, have been incredible. And I know everybody's doing what they can to make it right for us. So I really appreciate that. Definitely going to be there in December. Definitely going to try to just make that as high volume of an event for our class as we can. We'll have a class party, we'll have a ceremony, and we'll do what we can to make up for it.
Now, are you commissioning?
I'm not.
On graduation?
No, sir. So
Yeah, right.
I'm doing a 2-year program. I'm going to be a middle school English teacher down in Mobile, Alabama.
Awesome.
I'm pretty excited. It's
Cool.
it's not Teach for America, but it's a similar program, and they kind of put fresh graduates into under-resourced areas to provide a little bit more educational support there. And so I'm pumped.
Yeah,
Hopefully
great.
we'll get rolling down there in the fall, and I can get in my classroom and have my students. But like everything else, just got to go with the flow and see what happens.
That is awesome. What has VMI taught you so far in regards to your experience with leadership, and especially being the class president?
I'm definitely lucky because kind of got thrust into that opportunity in that spot pretty early on. So it's been a long journey throughout my time in this role. And so had the pleasure to learn from so many different people at VMI. A few names that pop into my head, Sergeant First Class Bean, he's the Assistant Commandant for the Cadet Government, working in with him this year. Colonel Faust, last year's First Class President, Eli Facemeyer. I mean, you go through this journey and you just get to pick the brains of all these great leaders, and different in their own regard, but you can kind of see what works well for you and what sticks out to you and was effective in your followership to them. And so I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is that the importance of leaders to be a steady keel, level-headed, patient, calm driving force. I think that, and that's for me personally. I came into VMI and you see pictures of leadership of there is value to leading in the front and being vocal and being loud. However, there's so much more to that. And the biggest mistakes that I've made in this role, and I mean, I guess that could be for life in general, is when I've gotten on the roller coaster of emotions. It's okay to ride the wave and feel that emotion, whether it's up or down, but not to make decisions when you're in that state. And so I think being calm, level-headed, not letting the external forces rile you up has been, I think, something that I'm excited to take out into the world and try to share with others. And then the other thing is just the complete ownership of your role and your people, because no matter what the mission is, I think that the people are innately the mission, and just owning your tasks in developing them and getting them prepped up for success. And that's what I've seen a lot with Sergeant Bean this year. I know I've definitely encountered people in my experience at VMI that have this level of ownership and others-oriented style, but he's the person that I've seen firsthand and been able to really benefit from. And so some of the stuff that I've learned from him, I'll have forever, and I'm really, really grateful for it.
Awesome.
So, Sam, what does leadership mean to you?
It's important. As I look back at Rat Trepp, I see a very naive guy looking at a guy who thought he knew all the answers and thought he had it all figured out. And so I expect and I hope to look back at first-classman Trepp and see the same thing 4 years down the road, because I think leadership, you got to be open to changing your outlook on things, open to experience, whether it's from someone higher or lower in your position. Being open to development of yourself, and then kind of like I mentioned before, you're talking about like your organization's mission and your organization's people. I think that's one thing. I think working through and for your people, whether it be peer, superior, subordinate, I think that you gotta always live through them and let that take the priority.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Sam. Thanks so much for getting on a call with us.
No, thank y'all. Thank y'all big time. I really appreciate it.
The Center for Leadership and Ethics would like to thank the following. Cadet Caleb Minus, Class of 20, for the intro and backing music. Find more of his musical stylings on his Instagram page, @MinusOfficial. That's @MYNUS Official. Colonel David Gray, United States Army, retired, Director of the VMI Center for Leadership and Ethics. And of course, as always, our podcast guests.
Find this podcast and other CLE programming information on the VMI Center for Leadership and Ethics website, and try our YouTube channel. Follow the VMI Center for Leadership and Ethics on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram accounts. See you next episode of The Journey. Thanks for tuning in.